I've got 5 more horror films for you this week, all on the low budget end. So let's get started with this week's low budget binge. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the path less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see with the usual Hollywood fare. I'll indicate in the review down below where you can find these films along with their trailers. Here we go. Bad Ben 5, The Crescent Moon Clown, is available streaming on Tubi and from the Bad Ben website. It's directed, written, and starring Nigel Bach. Renee, played by Jetta Tion Anderson, and her family has recently moved into the house on Steelmanville Road. Staying in the house alone for the night, she begins noticing strange things occurring in and around the home. When she finds a locked box in the basement, she opens it to find a cross, a clown doll, and ashes. When she throws out the box in the trash, she actually unleashes the Crescent Moon Clown, a monster who torments her throughout the night. The Crescent Moon Clown opens up a new chapter in the Bad Ben saga. This is more of a precise story set in one night in the house. I like it that writer, director, and star Nigel Bach has honed in on one single occurrence in telling this tale. Unlike the more out-there concepts like the time loop from the last installment or the extensive backstory from the first 3 films, I found it refreshing to see a simple and new challenge arise for the residents of the house. That said, the lead character is played extremely dumb. In order for the film to be feature-length, Anderson isn't allowed to react like everyone else would if they were in the same shoes. Windows open by themselves, doors do the same. Much of the film is Renee circling around the interior of the home, repeatedly asking what the hell is going on after closing windows and doors that she knows she has closed before. There's only so many times these occurrences can happen before you just start running out of the house and never looking back. There is a threat outside in the form of a screeching demon from the first 3 films to prevent her from leaving, but with the strange things occurring inside, I think I'd risk leaving rather than just staying and obliviously putting things back in order as she does for almost an hour. Not until the 50-minute mark of hearing noises, things moving, and lights turning off and on does this woman decide she needs a weapon. I mean, someone writes hello in blood on the floor of the kitchen in the first 15 minutes. That's enough to send me packing pronto. Another thing that really grinded my gears was that for the first half hour of the movie, Renee is walking around in flip-flops, which are annoying as hell to follow in an otherwise quiet movie. Hearing her clop around the house was absolutely grating. While the Crescent Moon Clown is supposed to be an evil entity, he walks around as if he were a real person. I was kind of wishing that it would have actually been just some psycho in a mask, as it would have added something different to the franchise. Having the monster be ethereal sometimes and solid in others only adds to the confusion. The film picks up in the last reel when good old Tom Riley, played by Nigel Bach, shows up to save the day. While he's not the best actor, I've grown to love the guy. I also find it pretty amazing that at this point in the series, following one person or another around the house for 5 movies now, I've pretty much memorized the floor plan of the house on Steelmanville Road as if it were my own home. I can't say that for many other horror films, and while this installment left me wanting, with the entire story boiling down to a single joke at the end, it does have a few solid scares, and I applaud the decision to move in a different direction with a new monster at this point in this series. This isn't a completely futile sequel, but one with a lot more obvious flaws than in previous entries. Next week we find out the way in the 6th Bad Ben movie. See you then. Flee the Light is new on-demand and digital download from Breaking Glass Pictures. It's directed by Alexandra Senza and written by Jennifer Mancini. Delphi, played by Ariana Marquise, has been plagued with mental illness, nightmares, visions, and a general sense of unease for as long as her sister, Andra, played by Annie Terma, an aspiring psychology student, can remember. When Delphi's visions guide them to a spiritualist, both sisters are thrown into a world of dark magic and evil spirits. Flee the Light feels like a horror movie made by people who don't really understand or like horror movies. It's not scary, it's not original. It's basically a story about two sisters coping with mental illness, thinly veiled as evil spirits. The film has the look and feel of a Lifetime movie, focusing mainly on the relationship between the sisters and the troubles they face finding their destined paths. This doesn't mean this is a bad movie, it's actually kind of sweet. It's just a bad horror movie, and more succinctly, it's a movie horror fans really aren't going to be very impressed with. The acting is quite good from the two leads, Marquise and Tuma. Both are extremely likable and capable of bearing extreme emotion with ease. Both have a charm to them that leads me to believe they'll definitely have a career in acting after this movie. Marquise is able to convey a likability in her bright smile, even though she spends most of the film hysterical. Tuma conveys quite a bit of strength, yet is still able to burden the weight of the madness she shares with her sister well. Both actresses are exceptional, better than the movie they're in. As I said earlier, the scares are simply limp, and the effects aren't much better, as the possessed don ill-fitting monster teeth and bad CG shadow veins on the sisters' skin in smoke. I didn't hate my experience with Flee the Light. It has a pair of actresses in it that I can't wait to see in better things, but I can't recommend this movie other than as a highlight reel for Marquise and Tuma's talent and likability. Those Who Walk Away is new in select theaters, on demand, and digital download. It's directed by Robert Rippberger and written by Spencer Moleda, Robert Rippberger, and Aaron Pollack. Max, played by Twilight's Boo Boo Stewart, is that his real name? Boo Boo? Goes on a blind date with an English major named Avery, played by Scarlett Sperduto. And when the movie theater they plan to attend is shut down due to a bomb threat, they decide to spice things up by checking out an abandoned house they think is haunted. Like you do on any blind date, I guess. Turns out the place really is haunted, and Max finds himself unable to escape the curse of a ghost named Rot Creep, played by Nils Allen Stewart. Can I start out by saying I love the name Rot Creep and how much it's wasted in this movie. Those Who Walk Away is not an unwatchable film. It actually has a lot going for it. The problem is I think it believes it's smarter and more unique than it really is. The entire film attempts to achieve its runtime with one single extended shot. And knowing what is put into extended takes, I will acknowledge that Those Who Walk Away is a technical achievement, especially so since it is filmed on such a low budget. The planning and skill put into making a film with very few cuts really is impressive. The cuts that do occur are masked very well, achieving that immediate and continuous streak nicely. I also found myself kind of liking the two leads. Both have a casual feel to their awkward first meeting conversation, and while I think the front 30 minutes creeps by at an arduous pace, it's made watchable because of these two likable actors saying the lines. Later, when the drama is amplified, both are able to carry the weight of some pretty heavy emotional beats. Those Who Walk Away really suffers from overwriting and forced metaphor. The drink the young couple consume is called Inferno. The whole time they are discussing metaphysical and existential theories that Avery is studying for her dissertation. Of course, these theories have everything to do with the way the story pans out. There's a genuinely clever scene between Stewart and his buddy on the phone where it appears the two are talking to one another via split screen. Then, when Max walks away, his friend follows him with a phone to his head as if they're still talking. Fun stuff. Again, this shows an inventiveness to the visual style of the film, but that style doesn't show up in the writing, unfortunately. The pretentiousness goes on until the very end, where the director can be heard saying "cut" off screen in the last seconds. I guess to acknowledge once again the extreme lengths made to achieve this done in one shot aspect. Had this youthful pretentiousness been turned down a notch, I think I would have been won over by the technical achievements more and maybe the extra depths sought after the plot. Unfortunately, I think doing this film in one take took precedence over story and especially scares, which don't really occur that often. I'd give Those Who Walk Away a mild recommendation. It's an interesting watch from a technical level, but predictable and overwritten. Shapeless is new on demand and digital download from XYZ Films. It's directed by Samantha Aldana and written by Kelly Murtagh and Bryce Parsons-Twesten. Ivy, played by writer Kelly Murtagh, is the lead singer in a blues band and longs to make it big in the industry. But holding her back is her eating disorder and severe body dysmorphia. On the brink of achieving her dreams, Ivy seems to self-sabotage this success at every turn as her body begins to betray her. I want to be sensitive about this topic as I know quite a few people who have been affected by eating disorder. I understand it's a debilitating disorder that has no easy answers or cures. That said, Shapeless was a struggle for me to watch, mainly because it is less of a story and more of a case study with no real beginning, middle, or end. Just as the title suggests, Shapeless is more of an amorphous snippet of a deeply flawed life. Stuff happens between the time we meet Ivy, who binges and purges massive amounts of food on a daily basis, and the end where she seems to give in to her urges once again. But there is barely any character development in that time. Instead, we follow Ivy as she acts horribly to her friends, walls herself in, refuses to get help, and ultimately seals her fate. I feel that the story hit so close to home for both director and writer that they wanted to present a real picture of horror someone with an eating disorder has to go through. In doing so, they forgot to make it interesting and possessing an actual narrative. In a lot of ways, the film reminds me of Swallow, another story about an eating disorder released last year, about a woman who swallows things that are harmful to her due to deep-seated problems in her life. In Shapeless, we're never even given any backstory as to why Ivy is this way. All we know is how Ivy is right now. In attempting to provide a respectful look at the disorder, the story is lost in the process. Shapeless is also overly long. A good half hour to an hour could be carved off, and it would have made a much more succinct and focused story. So much of the film simply lingers on scenes of Ivy's face, Ivy biting her cuticles, Ivy staring at herself in the mirror, Ivy looking at something off screen. I appreciate a lot of the cinematography. Much of the film is either right up in Ivy's face or showing her through blue and red filtered prism lenses. This reflects how critical Ivy is of her body, and the distorted imagery is an interesting way to highlight the dysmorphia going on. Still, repeated uses of this technique feel as if the film is padding for time and providing more glitz than substantial story. The horrifying mutations Ivy sees on her body are, I guess, what makes people think this is a horror film. These images are quite gruesome and do their job giving off an icky feel. Still, I feel this film barely qualifies as horror and feels more like an infomercial teaching us about this disorder than a story about anything. The imagery is quite striking. The performances are strong, even though they feel directionless. Eating disorders are horrifyingly damaging to those afflicted with it and those who love them. But in attempting to be distanced, fair, and truthful about the horrors of this disease and how hard it is to overcome it, those behind and in front of the camera forgot to make a story out of it. Live or Let Die is new on Blu-ray and DVD from The Shout Factory. It's directed by Manuel Urbaneck and written by Jan Bohlenschmidt and Manuel Urbaneck. Two loners, Nick, played by Jan Bohlenschmidt, and John, played by Manuel Urbaneck, try to make their way across the zombie-infested landscape in hope to find a sanctuary somewhere. Remember when every other movie released on demand and DVD were zombie movies? Such a stagnant time for horror. Thankfully, that zombie fever has died down. Sure, we still somehow have The Walking Dead, but for the last few years, it's been nice not having to deal with zombies. I don't know if it's been quite long enough for zombies to feel fresh again, but at the same time, I can still enjoy a shambling undead flick every now and then. Live or Let Die is a low-budget zombie movie made in Germany where maybe they didn't get the memo that zombie movies are out of style. And while you definitely won't find anything new in this one, at least it's a capably made low-budget zombie flick. Filmmaker Manuel Urbaneck, who is also one of the stars of the film, knows how to up the slow-mo, amp the music, and center on the zombie attacks, all in dramatic fashion. He also takes time to show us somber shots of a vacant and destroyed post-apocalyptic landscape. These are tried and true techniques, highlighting the drama of the peril the survivors are in, and they work. Still, Live or Let Die is not going to be blazing any new trails for the genre. The effects are decent, specifically the zombie appliances. They're practical, which I miss, though this one isn't afraid to get CG with it when necessary. There's decent carnage as the survivors attempt to continue to be that way, thinning out the zombie herd with knives and guns. You also don't get a lot of time wasted sitting around and talking as, for the most part, this is an on-the-road movie kept spicy by constant zombie attacks and the occasional horrible living people enjoying the lack of societal rules a bit too much. Live or Let Die is edited crisply. Occasionally, it's quite amusing in the way it incorporates its zombie tropes in ways that might have been creative in the 90s. It knows what it is and it's not trying to be anything other than that. The dialogue is less than inspired, but it's refreshing to get a discourse-free zombie film that isn't trying to pulpit its message into your brain pan. I like this one. Live or Let Die is simply zombie horror at its most basic, and sometimes that's exactly what I need.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're